eyes. Because we've been dealing with portraits over the last few weeks, lots of people have asked me about eyes, or they've made comments that eyes are really difficult. And I guess the simplest answer to that, and it's not a very helpful one, but it's all about observing. And if we could observe like robots who haven't seen um, eyes before, then we'd be able to draw them beautifully. And there are a few pitfalls that we want to look for to be able to draw them well. Um, I'll just show you. Um, there's a picture of an eye there. See if I can enlarge that for you. Okay, so that's pretty much a standard eye. I don't know why there seems to be, it looks like a CD disc in the middle of her eye. It's probably because the light that was shining to take the photograph was that form of light, and that's actually reflected in her eye. But this is a lovely image that we will come back to. And one of the things that don't help us is when we see an eye that looks like that, and the eye is turned to the side. And what we often do is we try to draw an eye that looks like it's facing forward when it shouldn't be, because it's facing in a different direction. Okay, I'm going to go back to that so that you can see what I'm doing. Now, I have just got some clay here, and what we did with this clay in the studio that I was referring to in the email that I sent out is we made an actual eyeball out of clay, and then we wrapped clay around it to form the lids and that sort of thing. But I'm taking a quick way out, and I'm using the eyeball. And the reason I'm using the eyeball is because it's easier, basically, and it's already made. But it's also not going to change shape as I push it around. So the first thing to let you know, and I know that you know this intellectually, is that your eye is actually a white ball that sits in the skull, and some of it sticks out. So if my fingers are representing the skull going around, half of it sticks out, or probably not half, probably a third, I don't know, and the rest sticks back inside our head. And we see that if you didn't have any eyelids. But if you did have some eyelids, it would probably go down to something like that. And in fact, it goes down to something smaller like that, because the lids, generally speaking, cover over the top and the bottom of the iris, unless you're looking all surprised like that, in which case I'm deliberately trying to make them look big. And surprised eyes, or Marty Feldman, who had some kind of illness, the lids did not cover the eyes. So that's the reason I'm going to be using the polystyrene ball, because it makes things easier. And what I'm going to do is, to help myself, is to actually represent the skeleton by putting some clay just around the eyeball like that, so that I've got something to stick the eyelids on. So obviously your eyelids, you've got more head above and below the eyelids, but we are just going to emulate what these eyelids look like. Now I'm actually going to put a flat edge on that, because as I put that flat edge over the eye, you can actually see that it curves around the ball. Now that is what I was talking about when I said if you actually have a form in front of you, you can see that I had a straight edge for the lid, and when I put it onto the ball, still, it curves around so that when you look at it, it's curving around the ball, and that's what's going to show the gap. And I also want to show you that there is an edge to the skin of your lid. Okay, so the lid, the piece of skin across there has got a thickness, and that thickness is quite important in how it affects what we can see. So now I'm going to get another piece of clay and I'm going to flatten that edge. My head's screaming at me to make the edge not so flat. And I'm going to put that piece at the bottom. Now, I can see that I have not actually put this, these lids on as per the size of this eyeball, because if you look closely, and I'm going to transfer to the other picture here, if we go back to that eye, you will see that you can see my mouse cursor moving, that the eyeball actually finishes there, and the tear duct, that part there, is not part of the actual eyeball. It's part of the whatever is keeping the eye in place. So the eyeball is actually a big area like that. So if I were to do my eye properly, what I should be seeing instead of what I've got here is this lid should go all the way to the edge. So let me stretch that out. So all these things are really important to know, because when we draw, we will often draw the eyeball to give it a rough idea of where it is, and then we'll put our eye shape on top of that. I am very guilty of this, and then put the tear duct there instead of putting the tear duct there outside of the circumference of that eyeball. So that's why I do want to actually get it correct on my polystyrene eye. So let's try that again, shall we? So is that long enough? Yes. Okay, so I've squidged it around a bit. But at least my tear duct is now going to be over outside of the ball of the eye. Okay, so now I'm going to, let me just move this camera along. Okay, so that's much better for the size of the eye. I have a suspicion that I have not drawn the iris big enough. I can see that because of how massive these whites of the eyes are. So maybe I should have prepared this earlier. So let's make our iris a bit bigger. But it is actually really good information that I'm doing it in front of you, because you can see how we get incorrect forms. So if you're drawing the eye, if you draw the iris too small within that circle that you draw to give you the eyeball, then you're not going to get correct proportions. So we are really zoning in on the eye. Okay, let's put that back on there, and let's take this one and put that back on there. So now our tear duct is actually off the white polystyrene, and it is a little bit better, and for me that is looking much more like an eye. Okay, so that's the first step. The next thing I want you to notice, I've just remembered something about an eye, so I'm going to change my shape a little bit. That is, the top lid is generally speaking more curved than the bottom lid when we are looking eye to eye. and generally there's more of the eye, of the iris, the colored part, covered by the top lid. What I want you to notice now, because this is 3D, is that the lid goes back on the top and it also goes back in the bottom. Now the bottom one doesn't go as far back as the top one because the top goes into where the brow is sitting. So your cheek flesh is further out on the bottom section than it is on the top section. So you can see a bigger lid on the top section, and that emulates the shadow of the brow over, and obviously you've got a bigger brow and the head carries on going. I'd like you to notice also that the bottom lid, any piece of skin, any edge of skin, has got a thickness to it. So you can see the thickness of the lid there, and you can see the thickness of the lid there. Now, why am I talking about that? So let's go back to our photograph of the eye. I am talking about it because there is a gap here. That's the thickness of the lid. Can you see that on the picture? And the eyelashes only come out on the very front edge of that, and this edge here of the eye often shows off light, catches the light, and you can see it's so light on that edge that it's blending in with the eyeball there. Now I'm guessing that whatever took the picture, hello Sarah, hello Jan, I've just noticed that you're online. Get back to my picture there. So you can see that this edge has caught the light, but have a look at what's happening here. Now first of all, we can't see the edge of the eye very clearly because it's hidden by these luscious eyelashes, and the eyelashes are actually coming towards you and then going up, so they don't go straight up from that edge. Okay, so that's another thing that we often do when we're drawing. We put our eyelashes, in fact we often put our eyelashes from that edge up. So that just shows you, zones in on, hello Brenda, thank you for joining us, it's lovely to see you. And the other thing I want you to notice is that this thickness of eyelashes and the thickness of the skin, they cast a shadow on the eye. Can you see there's a subtle shadow here? So while we are looking at this three-dimensional form, which is coming to us as a two-dimensional photograph, we have to remember that this is an orb, and as it goes back into the head we also get some shadow over there, and as it goes into the head here there is often a bit of shadow. Now this light is directly in front of this eye, so there's not as much shadow as there might be, but generally speaking the light will capture the middle of the eye, and as it goes away from you into the back into the head, it will be more shadowed. So let's go back to our eyeball here. Now I've got some strong light on here as well, but as I'm holding it like that, I'm just trying to see if you can see what I can see. I haven't got any eyelashes to put in there, unfortunately, but there is light capturing the top of the lid there, and that lid is actually in shadow. If I turn it for you to see like that, then as I turn it you get to see the light there. But you can actually, can you? I can see, let me see if I can change the position so you can see some shadow. Now I guess this is something that you're going to have to view on your own. I can see a lovely shadow there, but as soon as I turn it for you, the light is going directly onto that eye. So what I'm going to do is get onto drawing this eye, or drawing an eye, not particularly my although I did say that we did use our clay eyes to draw them. So I want to show you a few common errors and a few pitfalls for drawing an eye. So the first one I showed you was, if you draw, and it's a good idea to draw that circle to represent the sphere of the eye, don't forget that the tear duct is off that, okay? Now, you can see that I'm a human being because I've drawn an almond-shaped eye there. And what I want to alert you to is, generally speaking, when we are looking at eyes frontwards, the bottom lid is much shallower than the top lid. And the tear duct falls on the bottom edge. I once did a fabulous course with an anthropologist who was recreating skulls, and she called that the duck bill at the bottom of the duck, on the bottom of the duck's head. So remember that the bottom lid is a lot shallower than the top lid. Now, I've actually made another error, in that after you've done your circle for your eyeball, you should actually do a circle, a complete circle, and this is for eyes that are looking directly at you and not ahead with the turned head. Both of these are complete circles, okay? Now, the reason I should have done that first is so that you're drawing a circle and not an oval. So that's another pitfall to watch out. If you've drawn your eye first, people often draw an oval there because they think that that's stunning eye. Which one? Thanks for the comment. Okay, so if you've got a circle there, you can now draw the lid over and make sure that the shape of the eye cuts across a little bit at the bottom. It cuts across a little bit more at the top. The tear duct is off to the side. Remember that the pupil is also dead center. So if you're dead center of the pupil, oh goodness, dead center of the iris. So if you've done this, a lot of people will put the pupil in the center of the eyelids and not in the center of the pupil. Okay? So starting point, circle for the eyeball, circle for the iris, circle for the pupil, then put the shape of your eye on. And remember, it's not an almond shape with the line equidistant there and there. The tear duct is not in the middle, okay? It's at the bottom. Right. One of my next favorite ways of looking at an eye, to be able to draw it, to stop you drawing what your head thinks an eye looks like, is to look at the shape of the white. So if you remember our chat on negative shapes, this would be the negative shape, a negative shape within the eye. And if you look at that white shape there, that goes a long way to showing you what the overall shape of that person's eye is. And if you've put a circle there for the iris, that will be should match the shape of the white. So match the shape of the white there and match the shape of the white there. Now I'm looking at that and thinking, that looks awfully big. So maybe the eyeball that I drew was too big. Not quite sure what's going on there. that it's about modifying until it works. Okay, I'm not rubbing out, but you can see that I've closed that off because I wanted that shape there, and I often think that looks like a sail of a yacht. So that's the first thing to notice, is the shape of the whites, which will tell you if you've got the shapes of the lid correct. You should already have the shape of the iris correct. The next thing is that the whites of the eye are seldom white. Now we know that physically they are white because that's physically what they are. But generally speaking, the brow casts a shadow over the eye, the lid casts a shadow over the eye, the eyelashes cast a shadow over the eye, and as the ball goes into the head like that, or if there's light coming from one side, there will be shadow there. So it's exactly like a shaded sphere with light coming from there, but it's got the added shadow from something hanging over the top, something going into the head there, and the eyeball disappearing into the head. So we can put some shadow over the eye. Don't be afraid of doing that. The whites of the eye are seldom white when you're drawing a portrait. Okay, the photograph that I showed you, as I said, the light was coming directly at the face, as we could see, and so that would, now I've drawn, I didn't finish my sentence, that would be why the whites of that particular eye were white, or it was doctored in Photoshop. I've found lots of photographs that are doctored in Photoshop to make the whites of the eye white. Don't overemphasize the edge of the iris there. I do know that some people, in fact, usually the color of the iris gets a bit dark around the edge, but we don't want a big, hard line there. I've obviously exaggerated that. A soft, dark edge blending in is all you really need. Are the two negative shapes on each side of the iris the same side? That's an excellent question. Really good question. And the answer is no, they're not. If we look at our bald eye, so our eye without the lids on, then yes, it would be equidistant from the two edges to where they meet the skin. But because we have lids, the lids are at different angles, and so I'm destroying my beautiful model here. As you put the top lid on, generally the apex, the height of the top lid is about over here and not equidistant. It's not an equal curve. Sorry, that's something I forgot to mention earlier. So that immediately changes the shape here. And this is flatter, but probably the thing that changes it the most is the fact that the lid here goes off to where the tear duct is, so that this shape has got an edge to it there, and this shape has got an angle in the corner. So they are not the same size and not the same shape. They are similar size from the iris to the edge and from the iris to the edge there. But it depends how that lid droops over. So I also mentioned in the email that eyes change depending on the characteristic of the person, how old they are. I don't know if any of you who saw my video noticed, and I'm going to go onto my, back to this. I don't know if anyone noticed on my portrait, and I do know that somebody noticed because they told me, but did anyone else notice that my one eye is more closed? I think it's this one. I'm used to a mirror. That one is more closed than that one. And so when I drew my self-portrait, I drew it like that. So that will also change what these shapes look like. So the one eye is not necessarily the same as the other eye. The other thing that changes is how much space there is above the eye, whether there is an eyelid that you can see. So this is all about observation. Let's go back to this one. So is there an eyelid above? Or some Asian characteristics don't show that lid, and very upsettingly, some people have surgery to correct that, so to make them look more Caucasian, which I think is a very, very unfortunate state of affairs, that people think that Caucasians are the image of what is beautiful, and I think it's rather sad. But it is it's an indication that different races have different features. Okay, some people, my dad had very, very heavy set eyes, which means that they went into the head quite far and his brow came out quite a lot. And that actually, how about, let's put that image on, and then maybe you can see a shadow. So he had very deep set eyes, and they were under the shadow of the brow. Probably not quite as deep set as I've shown you there. Okay, a couple of other things. What can I tell you? Okay, I just want to take another 5 or 10 minutes. I don't want to go on too long, but there is a very important change that we need to know about, and that is when we come up to our eye that is on the side. And what often happens is, so I didn't set this up quite as well as I often do with having the picture there and my drawing there, so my apologies. I will put these photographs in the comments below. What often happens when we draw heads to the side, so if I draw representative of a head there, and the head is turned and looking that way, okay, that's representative of the middle of the head. What often happens, and the eyes are in the middle, is that people still draw their eyes as if they're facing forward. Okay, and they do, if the head is turned, then the eye has to turn with it. Now I'm actually going to draw another line on this eyeball that doesn't have the clay on it anymore, to represent the lid going across, so that I can show you what happens when this eyeball turns. Okay, so you can see that eyeball. Need to make that line a bit thicker. Watch what happens to what you can see. You can see at the moment, you can see both sides of the eyeball. As the head, and therefore the eye, turns, can you see that you can see less of that side and now more of that side? And as it turns more and more, that is no longer a circle. It is now an ellipse shape. So if you've watched any of my ellipse lessons, you'll see that as a circle turns away from you, it turns into an ellipse. If you look at the cap of my lens, as it turns away, it becomes an elliptical shape. So that would be equal to the eye turning. So the iris becomes an ellipse. It is no longer round, and you lose sight of this part of the eye as it turns away, and you can just see the side of it. So please don't forget about that. So in this example, you can actually see that shape there, and it's hidden under the lashes there. You can see that the iris is now an oval, and the pupil is an oval. and it's turned so far that the tear duct looks like it's going back into the iris there. And the bottom lid goes around, and then it almost goes vertically up to meet that tear duct. Okay? And the top lid, now there's a triangular shape there, and the top lid goes up, and then it foreshortens. That's called foreshortening. The rest of the eyelid actually drops like that. So it's very, very important for you to be aware of how the eye changes, how the view of the eye changes when it turns away from you. Very, very important, and it's very, very common for people to make this mistake. So if we now, obviously, or maybe not obviously, the size of this eye in this head is not to proportion, but the shape of the eye should be like that, and the iris should be an oval, and in the case of the picture we looked at, you can't even see the rest of the eye. And when you see the back eye, you'll probably see even less of what's going on there. So please be aware that the eye changes. Now I've tried to put my lid back on this bloke. Disembodied eye. Let's see what happens as we turn him away. Can you see that the piece of clay is coming down? It's disappearing and coming down as I turn away. So there, it's disappearing to a point there, okay? And I can just see a sliver of white. So please be very aware. Be aware of what happens when the eye turns away from you. It's very, very important to remember. And often when the head turns away, that eye is obscured by the nose as well. But we're not drawing noses today. One last thing just to mention, going back to our eye here, is at the top of where the eyeball sits is the eye socket, and the brow sits there on top of that, and your eyebrows actually sit on top of that bony structure. So if you actually feel it here, you can feel that your eyebrows sit on top, and the shape between the eye and the eyebrow is a very important shape to be aware of, as is the shape between where the lid crease is and the eye. So if I put some eyelashes on this eye, that's an enormous tear duct. Maybe I should have rubbed something out. It's looking a bit better. That's way too thick a lid there. So if I put a thin lid there and I put some lashes coming off the bottom edge, it'll be looking a lot better. Now, somebody mentioned in the portrait video that they learned not to put a line around lips, and they are absolutely correct. Don't put a line around the eyes either. So technically speaking, this line on the edge there should come from the tone of the eyeball. Okay, so I don't think that's a bad eye. I quite enjoyed showing you, highlighting these reasons why the eyes change. I will do a video on foreshortening, which gets quite complicated. Foreshortening is a whole different ball game. Being aware of foreshortening is something a little bit more advanced, but it's very much well worth finding out what foreshortening is about. I'm going to sign off now. and I'm pleased to have you on board. I'm looking forward to seeing all your eye drawings in my Get Drawing Facebook page. I have now made that exclusive. In other words, people will have to sign up to my email list to be able to get into that group. And I look forward to seeing you next Friday. Karen Frankel signing off. Get drawing. Bye.